Welcome to almost the 50th episode of the Purdue Basketball Beat.
We're inching slower and slower to it.
We're not there yet. We're not. There's an asymptote at 50. We'll just never reach it.
It's a what? What'd you call it?
An asymptote.
Is it an asymptote?
Asymptote, and we're saying the same word, right?
I don't know. I thought you said. I think you were saying something different. Okay, continue. I'm sorry. Continue.
I'm Michael, and that smart ass is Anish.
I'm Anish. Apparently, we sound the same.
Apparently, we get often when we go out in public together, which has been never. But if we would get mistaken for each other all the time.
We are two handsome, 7-foot-tall gentlemen. Yes.
Bearded.
Yes, that's right.
Called bearded gentlemen. Anish, did you get a haircut? Looks nice.
I thank you. No, I need a trim before I go vacation to warmer climates because like when it's hot outside, I really envy like bald people because like it's really easy to just cool yourself. I feel like the head just holds a lot.
I feel like bald people would feel that's patronizing.
Maybe it is, and maybe I'm intending to be patronizing to bald people. I'm okay with that.
Well, we'll know if we get angry texts from Dad following.
Speaking of, I guess we should get better at this because you should subscribe to us if you're listening. The Boiled Sports Podcast Network, wherever. Give us reviews, do all that nonsense. Follow us on Twitter. We're Anish Swami and the Railroad Tie. And we can I don't know. We talk about Purdue stuff. We talk about non-Purdue stuff. I don't care. If you want to buy
frequently.
Yeah.
Although I at least read the iTunes reviews.
I have never.
iTunes review so far indicated that Anish and I are pretty cool, but the old guys are kind of lame.
I like our listener. Or our listener, maybe.
Our listener. I don't care.
Maybe our singular one. What are we talking about today?
I believe we're talking about the NBA today, Anish.
Okay. So there are a large portion of Purdue fans who dislike the NBA for one reason or another, and whatever. I'm not here to judge. Kind of I am. Like, that's what I'm doing anyway. But so I think what we'll do is for the first half, we'll talk about like the Purdue tinge to the NBA draft, talk about AJ. We'll do like the current Purdue players that could go to the NBA and the whole process and timing behind that. And then we'll do the bigger picture of the draft and like the Pacers and stuff like that. So we'll figure it out.
We'll just talk for 35 minutes and then we'll talk. It's fine. So AJ gets drafted mid-second round. Some thought he could have crept into the first round, but he slipped a little bit. I'm not really surprised by that, though. Are you?
No, not at all. I was actually stunned when I saw a couple of mock drafts that had him as high as 24. I was like, there's absolutely no way he gets drafted that high. When I did the team by team, so I wrote a team by team like fit. I thought his ceiling was like I wrote his fit for all 30 teams, and the draft pick that I said that would be the highest plausible spot to draft him was 29 to the Spurs. And I thought the 30th pick to Golden State might have been it's probably the more realistic one, right? Because Golden State is going to have some center issues. I'm not sure if they'll actually pay Festus Ezeli. I don't think they'll actually keep Andrew Bogut for a while, so they were looking for a 7-footer. Instead, Damian Jones gets drafted there.
Mm-hmm. The Damian Jones whose lunch Hammons ate in the non-con this past year.
Yeah, and people point to like that being, NBA, like the NBA drafting on potential and whatever. But I don't know, like Damian Jones seems athletic. He seems a little more in the Golden State system, like style, like defensive style. He can probably switch ball screens a lot easier on the perimeter. I don't know. I mean, like I'm a little more sympathetic to people passing him up. It reminds me of DeAndre Jordan being taken around there, like around that pick, around the 30th pick. Whereas somebody like the comparison I came going a little back in the draft was Aaron Gray in 2007, like a 4-year player, pretty productive. I think AJ is a little more dominant. AJ was a little more dominant than Aaron Gray, but I think Aaron Gray made like, either an honorable All-American back then, or like maybe third team or something like that. But I don't know. I think he was a fairly productive 4-year player, going well behind, a second or third year player, but without much production, but had, a lot of tools that could be used. DeAndre's obviously way more athletic than Damian Jones, but I think he's really long. So I think that's what a lot of fans were upset about, was that how could somebody that AJ dominated go that far ahead of him?
I think if you're expecting a 24-year-old rookie with motor questions to be drafted in the first round, then you don't really know how the NBA draft works.
Or it's not just the NBA, right? It's that kind of a risk. Like you're buying stocks. You're not going to take a risk unless you think that there's a chance of it paying off. And even if you do, some of the investment, that risk is going to be measured, right? It's going to be a little dialed down. And that's the equivalent of what AJ is, right? AJ, there are legitimate concerns. Now the motor thing is whatever, but there are legitimate concerns that why did a senior get who's been through a lot of behavioral, I don't want to say character because that's really stupid, but like none of these were seemingly character issues. They were more just dumb college kid issues, right? But like, why would that player be like taken with a really high asset when there are these other players who don't have, maybe not as high of production, but have more tools and don't have some of these concerns that some NBA teams would have. So I don't have too much of a problem with it. I think middle of the second round was fine. This was probably why he decided to come back, because he figured that this was his floor last year anyway. Like probably the end of the second round, he was going to get drafted because he's a 7 foot, just like big 7 foot tall dude who can block shots. There's a spot for those players in the NBA, but I think he came back because it was just more of a what the hell. Like, I don't really have too much to lose. I'm not going to damage my draft stock too much. Going into the NBA being 23 versus 24, which is what he is now, like, or what he will be by the time the NBA draft starts. I don't think there's too much of a difference, right? So coming back was probably a good decision on his part.
Coming back was a good decision.
Definitely
it was. But I think, what I found interesting as I was reading heading up to the draft, a lot of those like anonymous scout type of comments, and people were still hammering him on his conditioning. Like, there was still stuff like, hey, this is the biggest job interview of your career, and you show up 75% of what you should be.
I read that too.
And I think, like, some of the motor stuff, and in the same sentence, they acknowledge that the motor stuff hasn't really been an issue since sophomore year. But he did not answer all of the questions that people had for him, and so he fell to a very appropriate place.
So what do you think about Dallas drafting him? What do you think about that fit?
I think it'll be good. Like, they have a really good program in place. They have a really good coach and a really solid front office and an aging team, but aging team that still could do like a little bit if certain things fall in their favor. I don't know. I think his biggest issue is going to be, does he make the roster? If he makes the roster, I think he'll be fine. But if he doesn't make the roster and he enters into the D-League purgatory, or gets stashed in Europe or whatever, I don't know how any of that stuff would play out, then that's probably it. You know what I mean? I don't see a guy like Hammons clawing himself back from that type of a situation.
Probably not. And for teams to take players from the D League, you'd have to be either young, athletic, show some promise, like for a certain amount of investment that's going to have to be made. So if he goes there, it's probably the end of it. But I have a hard time seeing them not signing him. I mean, like they only have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players on roster next year. That's not including Dirk Nowitzki, who is actually a free agent. There are rumors out there that Golden State is going to make a big run after him. I'm not sure how realistic those are, but the plausibility is there, right? Because Dallas isn't going to be a championship contender. I don't think they're gonna sign. They're not in play to sign Durant. They're not in play to sign any of these world-changing free agents, even though they usually get a meeting with some of them. They're not going to be meeting with Durant. The biggest free agent that they could possibly sign maybe is Mike Conley, maybe somebody like Al Jefferson or someone like that to pair in the front court with Dirk. But they're not going to be competing for championships, so maybe Dirk will go and ring chase a little bit. But I find that
I doubt Dirk's got a ring.
Exactly.
He has said that the only way that he'd consider leaving Dallas is if he was starting alongside all rookies. I think that was a paraphrasing of his quote.
Yeah.
Dirk will be back. The thing is that Purdue tooled a lot of its structure around ensuring AJ had the highest probability of success, right? Like a lot of allowances were made and a lot of sacrifices and a lot of energy was spent making sure that he was held accountable, right? India doesn't give a shit about holding you accountable. I mean, they'll hold you accountable by cutting your ass, right? Like they're not going to make any special accommodations for a second-round draft pick. So at this point, it's really up to him to decide that he's going to maintain his conditioning, that he's going to continue to work on his game, that he's going to retool for what will make him a mainstay in the NBA. And if he doesn't have that by now, he's never going to have it, and we'll find out by September whether he's got it or not.
So I think he makes it. I'd be stunned if he didn't make the roster just because of the way Rick Carlisle and that front office talked about him afterwards. They were really complimentary about him. Danny
Ainge was complimentary about Juwan Johnson and Ethan.
But that was a different
niche.
But that was a different. I mean, he went to a contender, right? Both him and Etwan went to a contender. They went to. I mean, and this is I think the one similarity there is that Doc Rivers and Rick Carlisle, neither of them like playing rookies. Right. Both of them really like trusting veterans. They like trusting veterans that'll listen to them. And maybe AJ will come in with. I think AJ is a little more ready to go, weirdly enough, than Juwan Johnson was, right? Because Juwan needed a front office that was and a coaching staff that was invested in developing him to adjust to the NBA game, right? And the NBA game back then meaning 2011. A lot more teams were playing big. A lot more teams were playing with two bigs, right? And even though Boston necessarily wasn't, there weren't as many teams like Golden State, like OKC when they decide to go small, that you see like LeBron at the 4 type players that you had to match up against. And that was where, I think if Juwan was even drafted 4 years later, he would have found a role a little easier. But some of the work ethic questions, along with stylistic ones where he's not really a back to the basket guy, I think that's kind of what contributed to his early exit from the NBA. And then he went to a coach that that notoriously just gives away first round picks, right? And so Dallas might be, Dallas typically does give away they are a team that gives away picks. They are a team that prefers to play veterans, but I think AJ can play the role of a young vet a little easier. But that is a spot of concern, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I sort of disagree with you on a lot of what you said about Juwan, but I think
on what, like what?
I think the main difference between Juwan and AJ is there is a clear position for AJ.
Yeah, exactly.
And Juwan was definitely not a 5. Not even in today's NBA is he a 5.
I think he would really find a role a little easier now.
His biggest thing was he didn't have the quickness to play out on the perimeter, and he was really bad in space, right? So if you're not a defender on the block and you're bad in defense in space, where do you go when you're?
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, like he would almost, oddly enough, he'd almost be a very Damian Jones pick, right? He'd be a pick where maybe you're hoping, like, who was productive, right? I mean, Jawan was, what was he, second team All-American or something like that?
Jawan was consensus first team.
Was he first team? Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's right. He was consensus first team, and he was Big Ten Player of the Year and all that. I don't know. I think that he would have been, like, some team would have taken him a little earlier than that, or at least put a little more stock into developing him. The other thing is he went to a Celtics team that was just a year away or a year out from making the finals, right? A game 7 in the finals, right? And so even though they were kind of fooling themselves with how long the KG era would last, they were still gunning for championships, right? So they weren't necessarily going to play a rookie. And the reason Etuan got more play was because he's a guard, and he's a guard that could, like, that was good at everything, but not great at any one thing, right? And those guys find a lot better of a role. Etuan is gonna kill it this offseason, by the way. He's gonna be a $10 million a year player, like, with the exploding cap. Like, there's gonna be a lot more money. I
had him at I thought he was going to make like 6. You think 10 million a year?
I think there are going to be so many teams with so much cap room that need another guard. Like Chicago is familiar with him. They've seen what he can do. They need a third guard. They need a second guard. I mean, I think they're going to sign somebody better, or sign a big name. I don't think that they're, I think that they might be a sneakily likely scenario for Conley or somebody like that. But they're going to need somebody. Like, they have nobody in the backcourt after trading Derrick Rose.
And they tried to get rid of Butler too. I don't know what's going on with that franchise.
I don't know. The Bulls are the Bulls, and that's going to anger some Bulls fans, like, who are Purdue fans listening. But, like, that even the Bulls fans know that ownership is ludicrous there, and management's a little ridiculous. But yeah, I think each one's going to get somewhere close to 10 million. I don't think he'll get a lot more than that, but I think he's going to be around that 10 million number this summer, which is good for him. He's one of the better third guards in the league. If the Cavs had room, they're going to lose Dellavedova this summer, probably. I think he would be perfect in that role. Now the Cavs don't have any money because they're paying Iman Shumpert all of the money to be a bad basketball player. But like a team like that, I think a team like the Bulls, the Pacers could use somebody like him. But I don't think the Pacers will. I don't know if the Pacers will sign him.
Who knows what the Pacers will do?
I know. We'll talk about that later. But I think he's got a clear role. And in terms of going back to AJ's fit, I'm scared that he landed in a weird coaching situation because I don't know what Dallas is trying to do. I don't know if they're trying to contend. I don't know if they're trying to rebuild. They're still holding on to Dirk's legacy, so they're trying to, consistently go for the 7th or 8th seed. They can't get a big name free agent to sign. So Dallas is a weird
They're
team.
waiting for Dirk to retire, and then they're going to crater the whole thing.
Which is
the Pacers, basically. Right?
Well, but they have done a poor job building up to Dirk's retirement, right? Or at least Dirk being a bench player, because the last couple of years they've traded away their first round picks trying to chase after guys or sign guys like Darren Williams. They signed him 4 years too late. Chandler Parsons is going to be a free agent. It looks like he's going to leave. I don't know what Dallas is doing.
Well, the thing with Dallas, they might be the most boring team in the NBA to watch.
I mean, that mantle belonged to the Pacers last year, but I think this year they'll be better. But yeah, Dallas.
But they're like, what's attractive? Like, if you're a mid-level free agent, if you're not the Durants of the world, but that second level down, like what Why would you go to Dallas?
Dirk. I mean, you go there for Dirk, and you go there like not for Dirk, but for how they treated Dirk, right? For how they treated their marquee guy.
Nash, how they treated Steve Nash.
Yeah, I mean that was a mistake, right? I mean they probably left a title or two on there, letting him go. But like for how they treated Jason Kidd, right? I mean, like Jason Kidd came in and they won a championship. Now how they treated him after that championship was a little weird, but I don't know. Like Cuban's reputation among NBA players seems to be a good one. That he's a player's first owner, which is very rare in pro sports, right? Like he was one of the first people that invested in like a true state of the art medical facility for them, in a private plane, like private luxury planes. I mean,
analytics. He was one of the first to take
Yeah.
analytics.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm saying, like, schematically, I think it's a really great fit for AJ if he would have stayed, or if Dirk stays, because I think he fits next to Dirk really, really well. And if they sign somebody like Jan Mahimi, like if they bring him back to start, Jan is a borderline starting level NBA center. I think AJ slots perfectly as a backup center. But if they give him a lot of minutes to start and don't forgive some of his inevitable mistakes, just because he's a rookie, he's going to make mistakes. I don't know. It's something to definitely watch. I'd be stunned if he doesn't make the roster, though. I'd be.
I tend to agree. I think he'll make the roster. It's just how successful he is in the NBA is going to be dependent on him and him alone, right? Like Dallas isn't going to hold his hand, right?
Sure.
And other teams, if he finds himself in search for a job, like other teams aren't going to really stretch to bring him in either. So
I was kind of I wanted to see him in Atlanta. I think Atlanta would have been a really great landing spot for him. I thought Utah would have been a really great landing spot for him. No pressure to produce right away, but in a great coaching, like both of them have great coaching staffs. They have established players that he could play behind. I don't know. Charlotte would have been great, but they didn't have a draft pick. But anyway, he's with the Mavs now, and I don't know. It's a cautiously optimistic situation. That's kind of what I am. You want to talk about Caleb and Vince now?
Yeah, I think Vince has a higher NBA ceiling. What do you think?
I would agree. I also was one of the few people that thought that Etuan had the clear highest NBA ceiling out of the baby boilers. So maybe that's kind of why I'm biased towards perimeter players. But it's I'm glad both. I mean, like obviously, I'm glad both of them came back. Though I was scared that Caleb that would leave. He is too like Spock, like he's too logical. Even though he's an emotional dude, I think he's largely driven by logic, and he could really see that that he wasn't like his value was at its lowest point this year, right? If he stays 1 year, 2 years, I doubt he stays all 4, right? Like he stays 3.
I think he's gone no matter what.
I think he's gone no matter what next year, and I think that's a good decision. But compared to if he leaves after his freshman, sophomore, junior year, his freshman year would probably be where his ceiling was the lowest, right? Or his draft stock was the lowest. So it never made much sense for him to go right away. But I think, like we were talking about earlier, Vince has a position in the NBA, or Vincent, I should say.
Vincent.
Yeah, exactly. He's Vincent now. I think he's got a much more defined position in the NBA. And if he can, I mean, he's shown that he could gain strength last year. He's a legitimate 6'8", 6'9", right? He is taller than advertised.
And he's a multi-tool guy. Right.
And he's a clear 2, 3, 4. Like I think he's quick enough. Like he's got to develop a little more quickness, but I think he showed that he's really like not a finished athletic product. Like we thought last year, we thought he was this slow, plodding, methodical dude. He came in this year and he could jump out of the gym. Now he has to improve some of the quickness, but I think he can improve it to rotate on anybody 1 through 4 in the NBA, which is a huge skill. And he's going to be stretched on ones. He's going to be stretched on some bigger fours. But I think it's possible. Like, all you're looking for in the NBA is for a split side. You're looking to make Steph Curry hesitate, right? It's just like saying Tristan Thompson or Steven Adams can guard ones. That doesn't mean you can guard them one-on-one. That means that when you're switched on them, inevitably, as they're going to search you out, when you're switched on them, can you make them hesitate? And I think Vince can do that.
He's a 3. I mean, his natural position is a 3 through and through. But I agree, he does have the quickness or the build and the strength to make those defensive plays. And scoring wise, I think his shooting has improved. He just needs to be more aggressive.
Where do you think that? So, also, I mean, like Isaac. Like I was looking at. I know, don't trust this, but it's the earliest board that I could find out there. I was looking at Chad Ford, and he, out of the 3 Boilers, he ranked Isaac the highest, and mostly because Isaac is a giant human being, and no matter how small ball goes, there is still a spot in the NBA for gigantic humans, and Isaac is pretty much as big as they come, right?
I think Isaac will have the opportunity to carve out for himself a 10-year backup center job in the NBA,
like Kufos, like Costa Kufos, right?
Sure.
Chris Kaman.
Come in, play 20.
Who are other white guys, giant white guys I can compare him to?
Brian Reeves.
Brian Reeves. That's a good one. There we go. What was it? He had a great farm boy nickname. I forgot it.
Big Country.
Big Country. Thank you. Big Country Reeves. Oh, yeah. Big Country Haas.
He's maybe a less mobile Greg Ostertag. I feel like that's an insult.
You know, I actually think AJ and Ostertag are decent comparables. I've never thought
of that before because I wasn't sure that I'm allowed to compare white athletes to black athletes.
Listen, the cross race
comparison. Let me know that it's fine. I think that's a great comparison.
It's a very very
I've always found Isaac Haas to be very Larry Bird-ish.
So I did that whole dive into AJ's draft stock thing, and because comparisons drive clicks, right? I tried to dive into Basketball Reference, and the realistic comparisons I came up with them, like the optimistic ones are people like Robin Lopez or like Andrew Bogut now, right? Not number 1 overall pick Andrew Bogut, but Andrew
for Hammons or Haas?
For Hammons. Yeah. I know the Bogut thing is a little big, but I think Robin Lopez, like, that's kind of a best case scenario for what AJ could be. More realistic, like Samuel Dallenberg, Roy Hibbert, Greg Ostertag, those are the kind of names that I was coming up with.
Or Roy Hibbert's corpse?
Roy Hibbert. Like when Roy Hibbert was like Roy is going to oddly be like like last 2 years he was one of the worst contracts in the NBA. I think he's going to go now this summer to one of the best values because I think he's going to get like under 10 million, and in this salary cap I think that's going to be a bargain.
I wouldn't pay Roy Hibbert a bologna sandwich.
Would you pay Roy Hibbert or Timofey Mozgov to be your third center?
Mozgov, so that I could watch those amazing
that's fair.
Local commercials.
That's fair. That is very good. Like him wearing his jersey backwards. Mozgov is incredible.
Mozgov is incredible. I think if the Pacers tried to get rid of Hibbert, he would just have an emotional breakdown on the flight.
No, thank you. But if the Pacers grab Mozgov, that would be an interesting one. Pacers grab Mozgov for like $6 million, $7 million because he's terrible. But they just need more big bodies. See, that's why every team always needs more big bodies.
That's why I'm saying Haas has a 10-year backup center career.
I think you're right. Yeah, and he's cut. Like Isaac Costa, I don't know how much fat he ever has had on his frame. Like that's the thing. Like with Hammons, is that he had to get leaner. He had a lot of baby fat coming out of coming out.
Still does. Like
but he's
the thing, right? That's the conditioning thing.
Yeah.
Why aren't you in better shape?
Isaac Haas looks like the Adonis. Like he is cut, and when he's going to be the NBA, when there are no like BS like practice restrictions on him, I think he could get even bigger and stronger. And he's already like, I think I don't know how many NBA players are bigger than him right now. Like, you remember, like, did you see that Vine of Boban Marjanovic in Sacramento or San Antonio? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't mean to mix up those two franchises, but when Tyler Hansbrough, for like, I think it was the first time Boban got on the floor, and Hansbrough, who usually like plays these mind games where he stares down players, like stared down Boban and then did a double take because Boban was so huge. Isaac is the same size and weight as Boban. Boban is just weirdly proportioned.
Well, Boban has. So here's the thing that I think makes Haas unique is that a lot of times when you get these guys who are over 7 feet, you start talking about like thyroid ishes and medical conditions that cause someone to be that big, right? That's
like legitimate. Like this is what I do for a living. Like, these are legitimate Marfan syndrome patients, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Haas is he's proportional as any 6 foot male, just scaled up to 7.
Yeah, which is why he's so bizarre, and that's why he didn't go through the combine thing this year, which is kind of a weird. I thought that was kind of a weird choice, but I think out of the I shouldn't say that because out of the 3 players on Purdue's roster that could go to the NBA, Swanigan is the one that's going to go, but Haas, I think Haas is a higher likelihood of going than Vince. I don't know.
Probably. Haas can cash his NBA ticket from this year on, like this upcoming season on. He can cash that ticket whenever he wants. Like, he can go at the end of next year, and he'll probably he won't do worse than Hammons, and he could wait till his senior year, and it's probably not going to affect much. He's sitting on an NBA contract.
Now, he seems to love being in college, right? He's not one of those guys where you have to guess. Like, he seems to love being at Purdue. Which is it's nice. Like, I don't ask that. I'm not one of the people who asks that of anybody who goes to Purdue, right? But that might be a mitigating factor that he might not go after this year. He might stay all 4, which would be a hell of a senior class if him and Vince both stay. But and depending on next year's recruiting class, like, that could be one hell of a team, or that could be a really bad team if Painter strikes out in 2017 and loses all 3 of them. I don't know.
We'll see how 17 shapes up.
Next year is going to be it's going to be it's one of those 2007 2012 moments for Painter, right? And that's how it works. Like, that's how it goes. That's pretty cyclical. But next year's recruiting class is going to be pretty big. But so out of those 3, do you see, outside of those 3, do you think anybody else on the roster we should be talking about the NBA?
The only dark horse NBA guy is Smotherman. Now, hear me out. He's built like a brick shit house.
Mm-hmm.
He's
a brick shit house. Continue.
Not a wooden shit house.
Okay, good. One of those, the high end ones. The ones where you invest. Like, you know what? I don't like peeing outside in the open, but I don't want to have to go into my house. Let's invest in this.
Yeah, let's put some mortar and some brick behind. He's got athleticism that's as good or better than most in the NBA. He just needs to figure out, can he play defense and can he get a jump shot?
Can he actually play basketball? Is what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much he was in he's got guard skills, right? But he's never really fit at Purdue. There's always been like a weird sort of like, where do we put this guy? And if he makes if he finds his place, then he can do a lot of stuff for Purdue.
I would tend to agree. This year is the big one for him, right? I mean, he's got the role of Raphael Davis. It needs to be filled by somebody. I mean, this team, like, we'll talk about it later, closer to the season, right, or later in the summer. But I think this team shapes up to be like the worst defensive team that Painter has, just not because of anybody's fault, but it's just like they lost the two of the best defenders in the country, and didn't really replace them with anybody. And so they're going to have to hang their hat on offense, and somebody's going to have to fill that role of being, guarding the other team's best perimeter guy. And Smotherman's got that. So if he can prove that, then yeah, sure. I think after 4 years, he'd be a really interesting, like one of those. Yeah, definitely a second rounder, but one of those weird, like it's almost an NBA unicorn, right? A guy who's played 4 years of basketball and who's old, who's an older kid, an older draft pick, but has potential, right? Has a lot of potential that can be built on because of his athleticism and, just being built on that. Like, so I think that I could see that.
I think it's still a stretch. I think
it's a stretch, yeah.
But I think if you're he's probably next in line. I don't see any other NBA players on the roster.
How tall is Carson Edwards? Is he?
He's 6 foot.
Okay, so he's a short dude. He's a Isaiah Thomas, like the new Isaiah Thomas.
Wait,
Yogi Ferrell.
Pistons or?
No. New, like Boston Celtics Isaiah Thomas. Yeah,
no.
Like a short dude.
Okay, maybe. That's where I think the comparison ends with him and Isaiah Thomas.
That they're both short.
Both short. That they're both at or below average for males in America.
Sure. I think, yeah. So it'll be next summer will be really interesting with the amount of NBA prospects that Purdue has. The other thought is that Purdue has had this many NBA level players at the same time and didn't get one tournament win. But we can save that for another podcast.
The weird thing is like Purdue has 3 players that could potentially be drafted next year.
Yeah.
But I'm really not sure what this team's ceiling is, or what their floor is, rather. Like they'll probably make the tournament. Like, that's not too crazy to say. But I don't see this team as like a Final Four caliber team. I don't know. We'll see what they look like when they actually start, playing games and stuff.
We were talking about it. We talked about this. I don't remember who brought this point up, whether it was you or me or somebody else on this. But next year is going to be less talented, but maybe more successful.
I don't know. I actually, they could go that direction or it could go the opposite. They could be more talented. They could be more talented from like a next level perspective, but they could lose in the first round too.
Yeah, I don't know.
The thing is that the college game, success in the college game is predicated on guards. I mean, it's a guard game, right? And Purdue has 2 centers and a forward who are their best players. Mm-hmm. And going against the grain is great if you're a Silicon Valley fart sniffer and you're but like for college basketball, like you need a point guard. You need a Yogi Ferrell.
That's where Vince comes in, and that's, I mean, like if we're sticking to the NBA spot of it, like Vince could be, I mean, like, the Draymond Green comparisons get used up like way too much now, but like one of those ball handling forward. Right, like what people thought Denzel Valentine, like what NBA teams saw in Denzel Valentine might be a better comparison, because Denzel and Draymond, the comparison only goes as far as they were both favorites of Tom Izzo at Michigan State, right? Because they're very different players. But Denzel was a 4-year guy. He was a really productive college player. He's quick enough to switch on to pretty much anybody. He can lock down the best player, the best guard or wing on the other team. He can score. He can distribute. He can ball handle. And he was drafted. What was he to the Bulls? Was like 14th overall or something like that. So like, I think that could be Vince's ceiling, right? I mean, because I think him and Denzel Valentine have very similar games.
Really?
I think so.
Really? I don't know. Valentine's basically a point guard. Right. I mean,
I think Vince could absolutely. You couldn't see Vince taking over a lot of point guard duties next year.
Maybe a lot of point guard duties on occasion, but he's also 4 inches taller than Valentine is.
That makes him a bit. I honestly, he's still got guard skills. I really
Vincent,
Vincent.
his skills, I think he's got old man at the Y skills. That's what he's good at.
Okay, yeah, sure. But those aren't tweeners anymore, right? For the NBA, those aren't tweeners. Those are players that are being valued now.
Utility players. You're right. I think what Purdue needs Vince to be, is the get a bucket guy, right? Like, get a bucket, get the ball. There's 12 seconds left. Get a bucket.
Weirdly enough, they need Carson Edwards to be that guy too, and so
well, maybe 2 or 3 years from now.
No, but I'm saying they need him to be. I don't think he will be, but they need him to be. But I don't know. That's another thing. We can talk about Purdue, like specifics about what Purdue is going to be next year. But we've got 3. I think we've got 3 pros on the team.
Yeah.
And so that it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how the NBA values them in the next 2 years. So bigger draft thoughts. Would you like anything? Did you watch the draft?
I think it was a terrible draft.
In terms of like the entertainment value, or like the players that were drafted?
The players, I think, are bad players.
I think there's a lot of talent between 15 and 45, right? But they're the top.
Talking about that, and it's like, yeah,
exactly.
How about this? Let's put it this way: the talent disparity between 1 and 14 and 15 and 45 is not as big as it normally is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not necessarily
a good thing. I mean, it's not. I don't think it'll be like the 2000 draft, which was horrendous.
No, that's an all-timer right there.
Yeah, but like I think that there are some utility players that could be used. The Pacers had the 20th pick, so we're both Pacers fans. And the Pacers had the 20th pick and used it on Thad Young, basically.
Why?
So, okay. We have to back up, right? Because you can't talk about this without talking about the George Hill trade. So the Pacers traded George Hill for T. Basically, like, traded it for the 12th pick, and then traded the 12th pick to Atlanta for Jeff Teague. And I didn't like that. I think, weirdly enough, I think you like that trade more than me, and I like the Thad Young trade more than you. So convince me of why Jeff Teague matters.
He's a better basketball player than George Hill.
I disagree. He's a bad shooter. He's a bad shooter.
That's very interesting that you say that, given that his percentages last year were the same as George Hill's, minus the fact that he shot much better from the free throw.
But first of all, the free throw line, it doesn't. I mean, when you're George Hill,
difference between 86% and 76%. Come on.
But that was, to be fair, that was the worst percentage of his career. He's an 82 or 81%.
He's on the downhill of his career.
And Jeff Teague is 28. It's not like he's it's not like he's, this star in the making. Is he a top 50 NBA player?
He was an all-star last year.
Of course, yeah, he was an all-star last year because all of the Hawks were really good. It was the Hawks that were all-stars last year. It wasn't the individual players. Kyle Korver was an all-star last year.
Come on.
Kyle Korver was an all-star last year. And
he was an all-star 2 years ago.
He was an all-star whenever the Hawks made
I thought wasn't Jeff Teague an all-star this past season?
No, I don't think so. And if it was, that's because the East has no guards outside of Kyrie Irving and John Wall.
The East doesn't have any guards, and the Pacers' main guard didn't even sniff the All-Star game. What does that say?
Because I think George Hill is one of the most underrated players in the league. Not because he's a star, though. He's not. What I will give you is that Jeff Teague is a much better point guard than George Hill. George Hill's a ball handling 2 guard. He's of the. like I see it as George Hill. The Cavs last year at the trade deadline made trades for Timofey Mozgov, right, and Amon Shumpert and J.R. Smith, and they were like these, like the big first take, whatever, like line that they used are no team is a J.R. Smith away from winning an NBA title. Now maybe that in hindsight that's a bad sentence to say because J.R. Smith is a shirtless NBA champion now.
Pleasure.
I love J.R. Smith so much. But like I legitimately think that George Hill takes like the Thunder and makes them favorites to win the championship. He takes even go a step lower. He takes the Clippers and makes them like viable NBA champion. Like he is one of the best role players.
Blows my mind that you think this highly of that.
I think if he is your fourth or fifth best player, you like the Pacers saw this when he was the fourth or fifth or sixth best player on the Pacers. They posted up one of the best defensive seasons in NBA history. They were a number one seed. They took the number one seed away from Miami. They came the closest in the East to dethroning the Miami Heat. The Bulls didn't push it. Even when the Bulls were healthy, the Bulls didn't push them as far as the Pacers did. And it was because George Hill was their fifth best or sixth best player.
How many years ago was this?
Just 4 years ago. Yeah, that's fine, but it's not like George Hill's game is going to age poorly. I mean, like George Hill is basically a glorified spot-up shooter, right? He's also probably one of the 5 best point guard defenders in the league. Like he's up there, Ricky Rubio, Chris Paul, and I think George Hill like shut down Kyle Lowry this year.
So you're saying he guarded Ricky Rubio well, or Ricky?
No. Those are the handful of really good defensive point guards.
Ricky Rubio is a good point guard defender.
Rubio might be the best point guard defender in the league. That's his skill. He can play make and he can defend point guards better than anybody else. He's really good. Just because he's a thin white dude doesn't mean that he's a tremendous point guard defender. And that's why it blows my mind that Tom Thibodeau is trying to trade him, and the entirety of Minnesota has been trying to trade him for years, because I think he's perfect. Like he's a perfect, Tom Thibodeau loves those Kirk Heinrich point guards, or like what the hell is his name? God, the really short dude who won a dunk contest, Nate Robinson. Like he loves those kind of players because they hustle and play defense. But I think like George Hill is a really, really good defensive point guard. And so this is kind of Larry Bird's midlife crisis, right? Where he's punting on all defense, because I don't think Jeff Teague is not a great defender. He might be a fine one. He's okay. He can switch pretty well. He's good. He's good enough, right? And so this is completely changing the calling card of the team, right? This team is going to be bad defensively. They're going to be really bad. And the coach doesn't match up with that. Nate McMillan doesn't match up with that style of play. Paul George doesn't match up with that style of play, because Paul George might be the best perimeter defender in the league. I don't know. The Jeff Teague thing didn't make sense to me.
I mean, so apparently the Pacers have the best point guard defender in the league and the best perimeter defender in the league.
And I think not the best point guard defender, but I think one of the handful. And who would you take over Paul George on the perimeter? Who'd you take over Paul George? The two names are Draymond Green and Kawhi Leonard, and that's it.
From like a forward who plays good.
No, to a wing that plays good, like good wing defenders.
I don't even know what to say. Jordan, I feel like last year, Jeff Teague had a much better season.
I'm saying Paul George.
Okay, right. Okay, well, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole with you, but I feel like when talking George Hill,
sure,
Jeff Teague, like every statistical category, Jeff Teague had a better season last year and the year before.
The year before, the Hawks had a really, really good year. Okay. It was an awesome year.
He's trending in the right direction.
I don't think so. I think we caught him just like Thad Young. I think we caught them right at their peaks, and they're only going to get worse.
So Thad Young.
So I like the Thad Young deal because the Jeff Teague trade was made, right? Because Larry Bird, whatever you want to say about him, Larry Bird decided to go for it this year, and I guess it means the 4 seed in the East. Thad Young is a better player and a great contract. When in the exploding cap, he's going to be paid like 11, 12, and $13 million.
That's true.
And he's going to be a better forward than anybody that would have been drafted at 20. And so basically, now that we take a step back, I did not like Jeff Teague for George Hill 1-for-1. But when you take a step back, it's George Hill and the 20th overall pick for Thad Young and Jeff Teague. Yeah, sure, I'll take that. That's fine. That's a fine trade, right? You get more athletic at the point guard position and a better attacker at the point guard position, and you find your starting power forward.
I think the source of my frustration is the fact that the Pacers are not a contender.
Mm-hmm.
And to say that, I mean they're not in the same realm as other contenders. They're like legitimately not going to upset anybody in the East, and they're set up to be like that 3rd, maybe, but most likely 4th and 5th seed for the next, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years.
But who's the 2nd seed right now?
I don't know, Miami, Toronto.
Miami, the whole Bosch thing just bums me out, right? But if Bosch comes back healthy, then yeah, Miami's the number 2.
Bosch needs to retire. I mean,
yeah, probably. But he's my favorite. He's my favorite player in the NBA. I love him so much.
So Toronto. I think Toronto's a better team than the Pacers. Right?
Oh yeah, definitely. But I could see the Pacers beating Toronto. Like even if Toronto, signed someone or signed DeMar or whatever his name is, DeMar DeRozan, re-signed DeMar DeRozan, and signed another forward. Like that team doesn't scare me. Atlanta doesn't scare me. It depends on what Boston does. Like if Boston continues to go forward with Brad Stevens and mediocre basketball players, then they don't scare me. The Pacers aren't going to upset Cleveland. And the other thing is, no, they're not building that even 2013 team that the Pacers had, which is a bummer. But now that we know that Larry wants to do this whole faster, more offensive based system, Thad Young is fine. I think.
Why didn't you hire Nate McMillan if he wants to play fast?
Yeah, I don't know. The Nate McMillan thing.
That was so weird. Frank
Vogel.
What?
Frank Vogel coaching this team would be really fun.
Well, fun being relative.
Well, I think Frank could make Jeff Teague a good defender. And that's the biggest thing.
Monte Ellis, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know.
I think, yeah. So I think the Pacers came out. I like the Teague trade in the fact that I think the Pacers got a better player than they traded away, but it doesn't light my world on fire.
Yeah, sure.
That Young trade, I think maybe when I think about it, that 20th pick is probably a shit pick anyway. So Thad Young is better. So maybe you can talk me into that. But I think at the end of the day, the frustration is the Pacers are going to be stuck for the prime of Paul George's career in this purgatory of 40 plus or minus 3 wins a season.
Well, so the biggest hole, the Pacers have 2 holes on their roster now, which is backup big, because Miles Turner is the guy and LaVoy Allen is the other big, but losing Jan is actually pretty big. Losing Jan Mahimi is pretty big, and starting shooting guard, because you can't start Monte Ellis and Jeff Teague because there's 0 shooting there, and Monte off the bench is really nice. Like Monte actually running a bench unit, if he accepts that role, like he could win 6th man of the year that way.
Oh yeah. I love him in that role.
But like Rodney Stuckey, get the hell out of here.
Rodney Stuckey and Rodney Stuckey's contract.
Oh God. Like I don't know, like trading for Costa Kufos with Rodney Stuckey and CJ Miles, maybe. Like maybe you'd have to attach CJ Miles. Like maybe that's a trade. But again, you're just like on the fringes here. Signing a starting shooting guard is the biggest thing. Now, this is where I'm hoping some of the like Kevin Durant dominoes fall, which is Kevin Durant is taking a meeting with the San Antonio Spurs, right? The Spurs need to offload contracts if they're going to sign him. Danny Green is one of the contracts that they need to offload. Somebody like Danny Green would be perfect in this. Yeah. Like, then I would love the Jeff Teague move, because Jeff Teague slashing to the basket and kicking to Danny Green, yes, please. Danny Green playing for $11 million a year, $10 or $11 million a year for the next 3 years, like the same, cheaper than Thad Young. Yes, my God, yes. That's a team that's the second best team in the East. Now, coached by Nate McMillan, I don't know, but
let's talk about that for a second. What the hell, man? Like you can't say that you got rid of your head coach because the players need a new voice. Whatever. I'm not in the NBA. Maybe he's right about that. And then hire an assistant coach as the head coach.
I don't know. And Nate McMillan is the very definition of like, the shrug emoji. Like, yeah, fine. Like, he's not bad. Like, nobody can get mad that their team hired Nate McMillan because he's a perfectly fine NBA coach. But nobody can get excited about Nate McMillan because, like, nah. Like, I love the teams that he coached, actually. Like, I loved the Greg Oden.
Jailblazers?
But no, he coached the team before the Jailblazers, right? So he coached that team with Brandon Roy when Greg Oden was really productive, a double-double machine, when LaMarcus Aldridge was just coming into being one of the 20 best NBA players. That was a really fun team. I had Rudy Fernandez on it. Like, that was a really fun team. And then everybody got injured. I'm sorry, and that was the team after the Jailblazers.
After, you're right.
The team after the Jailblazers. But like him as an actual coach, I don't know. It's like
I don't know.
You don't get excited for that. See,
it's
my
like
thing is, yeah, exactly. Who's like fine, great, he's good, fine head coach. But like, my thing is, if Larry was going to be committing to like Jeff Teague ball and like Paul George running, like Paul George at the 4, Miles Turner as a real stretch big, like go hire Mike D'Antoni. Like just go hire Mike D'Antoni and commit like full bore to all offense and no defense. Like keep Dan Burke.
Mike D'Antoni needs a facilitator point guard.
That's fair. I think James Harden could score 100 points in a game next year. Like I think he could break the record. At the very least, I think he could break Kobe's record of 82.
81, right?
Or 81. Like he could score 82 points.
That would be hilarious. Because it would consist of James Harden just hanging out at the half-court line.
Which is exactly what James Harden does anyway. Like except for that 1 year. Except for like last season. When he was good enough on defense and the Rockets were really good and they scored the 2 seed and whatever. And then they exploded. They absolutely just nuclear explosion. So that was fun.
Well, you can't. I don't know if you can build a team the way that they tried to build a team.
Well, it's not even that. They didn't have any. You absolutely can, but like you gotta have a dude like Draymond on the team, like a personality like Draymond that like will win at any costs on the team. Like when you build around the personalities of Dwight and Harden, yeah, you know what I mean. Like
they hate each other.
Yeah, I mean, two nut jobs that hate each other. But to the Pacers this offseason, if they signed someone, because they're not going to be able to sign somebody like Nick Batum or anybody like that, which would be lovely. But because Nick Batum,
green suggestion, that would be Incredible.
If Danny Green was a free agent this year, that's why I wanted them to sign him last year. But if like Danny Green is available, get him. Like trade a future first for him. Screw it, just do it.
You just don't want to win 45 games a year.
Exactly. You need that shooting guard. I'm terrified that they're going to sign Eric Gordon.
Make all those IU fans happy.
I know. Like,
he would have been great 5 years ago until his legs turned to oatmeal.
I know. It was sad. Like he had a really promising career.
Hell of a player.
But like, there were other players like Courtney Lee is fine. Like Courtney Lee's fine enough. But like none of the free agent shooting guards that are in the Pacers realm, like in the realm of being able for the Pacers to get, because this year they have $20 million in room, assuming that they just say bye to Jan Mahimi, but they've got to.
They'll slightly less because they'll probably re-sign Teague. Right?
So the Teague trade only makes sense if you renegotiate his contract and extend him this year, and so they're probably going to have to pay him like under the new cap, probably around like $16 million, like double the amount of money that he's getting, right?
That's an argument against that trade.
Yeah, it's like you're ponying up for 4 years and $16 million a year for Jeff Teague, and I get that.
I really think you're overrating George Hill, though.
No, I think is Jeff Teague one of the 10 best point guards in the league?
Is George Hill?
No, but the salary difference between what they're going to get.
Second there, I thought you were about to make that argument.
No, but the salary, like the difference between paying, like the having the 15th best and maybe the 20th, 25th best starting point guard in the league and paying like the difference between what they're going to get paid, give me George Hill's contract and George Hill's skill set over Jeff Teague. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I'm not huge on the contract. Now, Hill is a expiring free agent, and Larry Bird never really liked George Hill anyway. And so fine, I guess.
Wait, did Larry make the did he make the trade for Hill?
So Larry probably. So Kevin Pritchard is, I think, the big decision maker or the big like chess piece mover. But Larry gives the direction of the team.
Right. No, I mean like back in the when the Pacers basically traded Kawhi for George Hill.
I hate when it's brought up like that because it's like the Pacers didn't have a starting point guard. They had Darren Collison.
Well, I mean, that's the trade. I'm not saying like I'm not judging them harshly for that. Because
I think Larry made that trade. Yeah.
Okay.
Like Larry was in charge when that trade was made.
I don't think Kawhi develops into Kawhi Leonard as a Pacer
because he didn't have a starting point guard, and he was behind two wings that were really good. He was behind Paul George, and Danny Granger was the Pacers' best player at that time, right? So Paul George wouldn't have been as good, and Kawhi wouldn't have been as good, right? It would have been a future that would have been, I don't know. There are a lot of dominoes in that future anyway. So the one in the last like 10 years, the one draft that he didn't make was when he retired or when he stepped down the day before the draft, which is the Draymond Green draft. And he was in love with Draymond Green. And Bob Kravitz, who has the ear of Larry Bird, was like, the Pacers are going to get Draymond Green. Like, this is going to happen. And I was kind of excited because we had been we have been professionally hating Draymond Green for the last like 10 years, it feels like.
Correct.
But we knew how good of a player he was. And then Larry stepped down the day before the draft, and the Pacers picked like nobody.
There's a book there somewhere, right? Like with what happened with that whole Larry Bird thing.
I don't know. And then like he was about to come back when it looked like the Kings were going to move to Seattle, and he was going to be Seattle's GM. Like there was a whole lot of weird rumors.
Has there been the story behind all that? I don't remember anything.
Not yet. No.
All right, Anish, that's your job.
Anyway, yeah, exactly. I have nothing else to do.
Drop out of your PhD program.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell your fiance to put it on hold.
Exactly.
And research a weird job thing from 6 years ago.
Hey, a good column could come out of it.
500 words.
Yeah, it was a good. It was a good. It would have been a good Grantland column back in the day, right? Maybe it's a good ringer piece.
References.
Yeah, maybe it's a good ringer piece, but who knows? Anyway, that's an hour of the NBA. The takeaways are that we think Isaac Haas probably has the longest NBA career on the roster out of the four. AJ ended up in a decent place, fine enough place, and next year is going to be weird for the Pacers.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it.
It's fine. And now we don't have any sports until November.
Yeah, that's right. We'll come back later this summer. I think Justin and I have is Matt Painter a top 40 coach podcast, where we literally go through the 40 coaches.
Might sit that one out and just listen to it for
entertainment. And then there's an athletic director just yelling fast. I think that's one of the few where we might have all four of us on, where I think that's enough. That's important enough where all four of us should probably be on there and yelling about the way Purdue does business.
You know what? We got to wait until they hire him.
That might take another year.
Yeah.
So who knows? But we'll be back in the summer with some of these off-topic things. But maybe we'll even do a podcast about that.
We should have one that's like a retrospective on Purdue football, like what it was like when Purdue had a football program.
Oh yeah, I mean it was great. Curtis Painter, looking wistfully at the Curtis Painter era.
Yeah, people hated Curtis Painter.
I was on campus during the Curtis Painter era, and I hated him. And now I would kill for a quarterback like Curtis Painter.
Our problems extend beyond quarterback.
Exactly.
Mostly, our biggest problem is that we don't have a program anymore.
That's true. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
We demolished Ross-Ade, I believe, to build a 300-foot tall statue of Morgan Burke, right?
Giving the finger. Yeah, it was odd choice. Odd choice. Pants around his ankle.
I was gonna say I don't know if it was the finger or if it was if it was something else, but
it's really grotesque.
Yeah, exactly. But hey, Morgan Burke, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the podcast.
Oh gosh, would love to have you on there, Morgie. That's going to be fantastic.
But I think that's all we got for this week. Thanks for listening, for the two of you that are still listening. But, yeah, we'll talk to you later.
Bye.